Hello, my name's Mark Arnold from Urban Saints, and this is part one of a series of videos exploring the world of disability equality. We'll be looking in this video at what the big picture is for people with disability in the UK in 2020. What's the state of the nation for disabled people today? The first thing for us to consider is that there are a lot of people in the UK who have additional needs or disabilities. About 1 in 5 people across the UK as a whole have some kind of disability. And that ranges from physical disabilities, such as mobility disability, or people who are blind or deaf, through to mental health conditions and disabilities, including depression and anxiety, but also including learning and intellectual disabilities, through to more hidden disabilities. Often we're talking about these now as differences or diversities, such as people who are autistic or dyslexic, or who have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. When we start to break those numbers down, we can see that there's a wide difference in the different kinds of disability that people face and experience, and the numbers of them in our society. So, for example, approximately 1 in 800 people in the UK have Down syndrome. Whereas when we start looking at people who are autistic, that may be as many as 1 in 80. Some figures are even suggesting something around 1 in 68, as a result of better understanding and information around autism. When we start looking at conditions like people who are dyspraxic or dyslexic, or who have ADHD, it could be as many as 1 in 10 of the people in our society all around us. So there's a lot of folk in our community that journey with some kind of additional need or disability, diversity or difference. When we start to look at that from the perspective of sort of socio-economic groups, then we start to see that actually people with a disability or additional needs are predominantly more likely to be in the poorer socio-economic groups. Half of people who are either journeying with a disability themselves or are living with somebody with a disability are in the poorer segments of our economic groups. Reasons for that are many and various, but they include that often when there is somebody with a disability themselves or a family member, somebody has to scale back on their work commitments to be involved as a carer. Often folk with disabilities find it harder to engage or be engaged in the workplace. People with disability are at the bottom of all the league tables for education outcomes, health outcomes, employment outcomes and life expectancy. So it's pretty tough for folk who are in that category and their family members. A study by Mumsnet recently highlighted that families of children and young people, and indeed young adults with additional needs and disabilities, often feel excluded from a wide range of different social activities, the kinds of things that often people would take for granted. Being able to go out for a meal, go to the cinema, meet up with friends can be harder for them. So there are all kinds of pressures that journeying with a disability or additional needs can bring, both to the person themselves and to the family that they're a part of. Over half of families that have a child with a disability tell us that they experience significant relationship difficulties and even breakdowns as a consequence of the pressures of raising a child with a disability or additional needs. I'm a dad to a now 17-year-old young person who's autistic, has learning disability and epilepsy, as well as some anxiety issues that we're working through with him too. And so I know firsthand what some of those pressures can be like, and it grieves me as a dad to say that often where those relationships fall apart and families break up, it tends to be dad who goes and mum who ends up as the full-time carer and a single parent for the family. So you can see there's a lot going on in the lives of disabled people and the families that they are a part of. But it doesn't end there, because a lot of disabled people, and indeed even starting as children, can experience bullying as a consequence of their disability. Often for disabled people, their first understanding and experience of being treated differently, being discriminated against, is when they're bullied as children, and over 60% of children with additional needs and disabilities experience that bullying. It's heartbreaking, isn't it, when we think of that happening across the country right now. And that leads on often to a lifetime of whether they're children, into young people and into adulthood, people with disabilities and additional needs feeling and being discriminated against. As many as a third of all disabled people report that they have been discriminated against when trying to access services or to buy things or to engage with businesses in different ways. And around 20% of disabled people would also claim that they have been discriminated against in the workplace as well. And so for a lot of disabled people, this discrimination is very real and can affect their lives in very tangible ways. And we'll be exploring a little bit more of what discrimination looks like, and specifically looking at it through the lens of the Equality Act of 2010 in further videos in this series. But for now, as we just wrap up this first video exploring the big picture, the state of the nation for people with additional needs and disabilities, it's worth just looking back at some of those statistics that we've just considered and maybe just putting yourself in the position of a disabled person or a person with additional needs, and just thinking what that would be like for you. Maybe there are people that you know in your workplace, or the customers in the place where you work. Maybe you're involved in the education world and you've got children or young people that you are in contact with that have additional needs and disabilities. Understanding their world and experiencing it a little bit through their lived experience helps us to understand disability better. We'll be bringing some more information to you in other videos in this series, so look out for those.